Storytime about how I messed up giving a homeless girl my room at a hotel. Over the weekend, I was staying at a popular UK chain hotel and thought I was going to be there until Sunday night. Well, 1 p.m. comes and I get back to the hotel early from having lunch, and it turns out that they have a strict checkout time of 12 p.m. to get your money back. And I don't really want to stay there all day by myself miles away just for the sake of it. Over in the corner of the hotel lobby was a little lounge area with a sofa and some armchairs. There was a girl who must not have been much older than 18 or so sleeping on the sofa, and you could tell from her appearance that she was sleeping rough and had come inside out of the rain. The hotel reception staff had walked over to her and were asking her to leave, which I understand, but I felt horrible for her. I followed her out into the car park and offered my room key if she promised not to trash the room as long as she checked out on time. She agreed, and so I went on my way, not really thinking much about it other than how she wouldn't have to sleep outside in the rain. I spoke to my brother later on and he informed me that if something bad happened to her in the room, then it would be on me, so I was panicked all last night. I tried calling the hotel to tell them the situation but couldn't get through. Well, they eventually called me, and it turns out she didn't only trash the room, but she also urinated in the hallway, tried to smash the vending machine, and was a general disturbance to the other guests. The hotel informed me that I'd have to pay for any damages, and the reception lady gave me a very stern lecture about why they don't just give people rooms when they show up like that. Lesson learned, but at least an 18-year-old girl didn't have to sleep outside in the rain and be open to any number of dangerous situations for a night, I suppose.
Michael, and even though I grew up poor, I went to a school full of rich and spoiled kids. The worst part was being picked on by my classmate, Paul. He always asked me why I was walking to school instead of driving my own car. Of course, he knew my family didn't have enough money to buy me a car, but he simply enjoyed reminding me that his parents were richer than mine. Trust me, I hated Paul. But every time he made fun of me, I swore myself that someday I would be richer than him. The only question was, how? I wasn't the smartest person in the world, and frankly, I wasn't hardworking either. Well, after months of me trying to find an easy way to become rich, I had an idea. What if I would marry a rich and old widow? I mean, I was handsome and pretty good at talking to other people. I thought that every grandma would see me as a great catch. But where could I meet an old and rich widow? I was just some poor guy from New York. I decided to do some internet research, and bingo! I found dozens of articles about an old and widowed woman whose rich husbands had died a long time ago. I decided to go for one specific widow. Let's call her Elizabeth. She was 72, and her husband had been one of the wealthiest fashion designers in the world. Well, until he died of a heart attack. The only question was, how could I meet up with her? I decided to call her secretary, and I pretended to work for the New York Times. I asked if Elizabeth was interested in giving an interview about her deceased husband. The secretary said, Elizabeth doesn't do interviews, but she will attend a charity event inside the Hyatt Regency Hotel next week. You can try your luck and approach her there. Bingo. But then I learned that a ticket to the event cost $500. To be able to afford it, I had to beg my mom for 2 hours straight. I told her, if you give me those $500, I will pay you $500,000 back someday. When she finally gave me the money, she said, I don't have much more, so don't waste it. I thanked her 1,000 times and went on to buy the $500 ticket and rent a good suit for a day. When I arrived at the event, I was super nervous. I felt so out of place around those old and wealthy people. But then I saw Elizabeth. She didn't look very happy. She almost looked sad and bored. When she came back from the restroom, I took my chance and said hi to her. She was pleasantly surprised and said, Oh, sir, with whom do I have the pleasure of speaking with? I said, I'm Michael. My uncle invited me to this event, but I don't have anyone to talk to. She said, Oh, come sit at my table. Those people here are so boring anyway. Well, that's how it started. We talked for hours, and we were joking and laughing, and the sad old lady turned into a happy and energetic woman again. When the event reached its end, I said, If you ever want to meet again, I'll give you my phone number. She said, Of course. I'd love to spend time with someone as young and fun as you. Then, 3 days later, she invited me to her villa inside the Hamptons. Before I arrived, I checked the estimated value of her home on Zillow.com, and it said $40 million. Wow! But I told you, her husband had been one of the richest and most successful fashion designers in the world. So when I arrived, her butler picked me up and escorted me to Elizabeth. She was wearing a pink outfit and said, Oh, there you are. I'm so happy you took the time to visit me. I gotta admit, talking to her was a lot of fun. But nothing else happened. At least not on our first date. But on our second date, we had a little bit too much champagne, and we kissed. I know, how gross. But the champagne made it easier for me, and of course, Elizabeth was on cloud nine. She was so happy to have a handsome and young guy like me as her lover. She also told me about her family. She said none of them visited her because all they did was party in Hollywood. She said they only waited for her to die and take her inheritance. I told her how sorry I felt for her, and she said, "It's okay. You are a gentleman. You know how to treat a lady like me." That's where our love story started, and for the next 2 years, we spent all our time together traveling all over Europe, sleeping in the finest hotels, and always flying private jets. Everything was going well until her family found out she was dating me, a 20-year-old boy. They called Elizabeth and told her to break up with me, because according to them, I was only after her money. But Elizabeth was a smart woman. She perfectly knew that part of why I was her boyfriend was a luxurious life she was providing me. But her family didn't care that I made Elizabeth happy. They kept trying to destroy our relationship. Well, at least until Elizabeth broke off all contact with them. She was happy having me as her boyfriend, and that's all that mattered to her. And a week later, she came up to me and said, "Michael, let's get married." And of course, I said yes. I understand that people assume I only married her to get her money, but that's not true. I really liked her. But then, just 6 months into our marriage, she didn't wake up from her sleep. It was tragic, and the doctor suspected that she had accidentally taken the wrong pills the night before. But it didn't matter, because I was her husband at the time of her death, so I was legally entitled to her whole fortune. And trust me, it was a very big fortune. I thought about giving some part of the inheritance to her family, but all of them already had a few million on their bank account, and they had always treated Elizabeth like trash, so I decided to keep the money for myself. Of course, they tried to sue me, claiming I had killed Elizabeth, but none of their accusations had any truth to them, and in the end, I let my lawyers handle it. But of course, I hadn't forgotten why I had wanted to become rich in the first place. After I had received Elizabeth's money on my bank account, the first thing I did was buy a Bugatti Veyron Supersport for $2 million in cash. And then I drove it to Paul's house. You remember the guy that made fun of me in high school? I rang the bell at his parents' home to see if he was still living there. And indeed, he opened the door and looked very surprised to see me. He said, "Michael, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I just wanted to inform you that I have hundreds of times more money than your stupid parents. Just come, I want to show you my car." We walked to my car, and Paul looked almost shocked. He said, "There is no way that's your car. You must have rented it." But I knew he would ask that question, so I opened the trunk, where I had stored $5 million in cash. I said, "You think I rented these too?" Paul didn't respond, and then I went right in front of his face and said, "Now you know who's balling." And then I went into my car and just drove away. Since then, I've sent Paul a Christmas card of me next to one of my cars every single Christmas. Oh, and do you remember how I promised my mom to pay her $500,000 back for the $500 she gave me? Well, I gave her much, much more money, because she really deserved it.
So a few years ago, I met a guy at a bar. He was an absolute gem. He helped me take my drunk friend home in an Uber, paid for the Uber, got me food on the way back to his house. He lived by himself, and he did say that he had a roommate that just left. So we were sitting there in the morning, eating breakfast. I'm wearing his shirt. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, someone starts banging down the door and trying to come in. He jumps up and he starts freaking out. He's like, "No, Dad, don't come in, don't come in." I'm just like, what the fuck? He's like, "Go into the bathroom." So I'm like, "Ah!" Okay, so I'm like, run into it. I'm like, don't know what's gonna happen. FYI, this is a grown man. Why would his dad be coming to his house? His dad starts banging down the door trying to get in. So eventually after 10 minutes, he's like, okay, you can come out now. And I was like, what was that? And he's like, oh, my dad, he's just a little bit, he's got something wrong in his head. I was like, okay, what? So he just turns up at your house? But then I thought, you know what? A lot of brown parents do that. They have no boundaries and they think that it's their God-given right to just barge in any time. So I was like, yeah, I understand. So I let it go. We stayed in touch. The second time we hung out, it was fine. The third time, we were making plans during the week to meet on the weekend. He disappears from Thursday to Monday. Does not return calls, anything. I'm like, what the frick is going on? He gets back in touch. I left his phone with a work colleague over the entire weekend and he didn't have my Facebook, so he couldn't contact me. Something just didn't feel right. And then I checked his WhatsApp because we'd only been texting this whole time. So me and this guy, we had been communicating via text only, and I decided to check his WhatsApp because he disappeared. From memory, I think he made it sound like he doesn't have WhatsApp, so I did check. All of a sudden, I see a picture of him with a little boy. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Does he have a kid? Is it a nephew? Like, huh? Thing is, the apartment he took me to, it was 2 bedrooms, so it's highly possible that he did have a roommate. However, there was no sign of a woman ever having been there. So he's like, don't worry, I'll make it up to you. So we made plans for the following weekend and we were texting during the week and we we're kind of bantering. All of a sudden, he just blocks me. I think because he doesn't like my banter, and I'm going to speak to guys like a guy. I'm going to pay you out. I'm going to bag you. I didn't really understand what the hell happened, and I had no idea I was going to see him again under very different circumstances. So he blocks me. I never hear from him again. Around about a year later, my friend, like a platonic male friend, calls me up and he's like, come to this thing with me tonight. And he was kind of like a social fairy godfather to me, so I was like, oh, of course, why not? So we go to this event. It's very grand. It's London, and there's a lot of people in this room. I'm drinking my champagne. All of a sudden, I'm just like, and I was like, oh my God, he's here. That guy's here. I grab my friend and I'm like, oh my God, I know that guy from across the room. My friend's like, what? How? And I'm like trying to tell him the story, like holding my glass and being discreet. All of a sudden, the guy sees me and he's like, his face, my God, I wish you were there. So I'm just like, just trying to act normal, and so glad I had the champagne with me. Obviously, he tells his work colleagues, so one of them comes over to us and starts making snarky little comments at me. I'm like, I'm sorry, who the fuck do you think you are? However, what they did think was that me and my friend were together. And the best part is, the event turned out to be his work event party for their most favored clients. My friend was a VIP client of theirs. So in effect, you have a man who blocked a woman. She turns up to his work party with a very fucking important person. Thanks, Karma. No wonder he was pissed. But I still have questions. Whose house was that? Who was trying to get in? Was he married? Where did he disappear to over the weekend?
You ever had one of those good buzzes going where you don't really give a fuck what happens? You pull an Alec Baldwin, give me the gun, let's shoot the next scene. I don't give a fuck. Too soon, Zach? Don't give a shit, all right? I'm downstairs. My kids come bebopping down the stairs like they're in unison, like we're about to do some jazzercise. She comes in clapping like it's my birthday at Texas Roadhouse, my oldest. She goes, you guys ready? It's just me and my wife on the couch and all her other personalities, so it's a full fucking house, right? She goes, you guys ready? She goes, Daddy, I'm trying out for cheerleading this weekend. Sissy, hit it. Had she said, Sissy, spin that shit, I'd have burnt the fucking house down. Her sister presses play on her iPod Touch, and it's playing Taylor Swift, Shake It Off. She goes, I stay out too late. And her sister's in the background, nothing on my brain, hyping her up. They had a whole choreograph, and she killed it. She did one of them little things. She did a couple of these, a couple of those, some of that. I'm crying. I've never been more proud. I gave them a standing ovation. I'm like, Skylar, get on your fucking feet. These kids, I took them to McDonald's. I was so happy. Sometimes, I don't even know where the fuck that came from. They was upstairs choreographing that shit, team working together. I've never been more, she better make the cheerleading team. That's all the fuck I gotta say about it, because she's got spirit. Yes, she do. She got spirit.